There's a very famous scene which went viral years ago, from the movie They Live by John Carpenter, released in 1988. In the movie, the main character, John Nader, has discovered a pair of sunglasses that allows him to see through the lies and deceptions of modern society, to see what types of responses were posted. Now, I am undoubtedly doing this to depress myself, and depress myself I do, and did, with this video. Now, a good percentage of the commenters were primarily claiming that she experienced catcalling. Many of them pointed out the clothes she was wearing, despite the fact she was wearing very normal clothes. Not that normal clothes is a thing, but you know what I mean. They claimed the trucker must have thought she was a lot lizard, and I quote, despite being surrounded by her family and children. And it's important to note, the vast majority of these types of comments were framed in a mocking, chastising, and victim-blaming manner. Not just a well actually, but a well actually and good. Others claimed it couldn't be racism, because of the lack of explicit racial epithets or insults. That her demeanour, her laughing and smiling, as she says, "Are they doing this to us because we're black?" shows that this could not have been an example of racial abuse. Now finally, a number pointed to this as further evidence of victim mentality, the race card being used in examples where they are not appropriate. One commenter wrote, "Of course everything is about them." Now I'll be honest with you all, I don't know whether it was racism, or catcalling, or both, quite likely both. The trucks are out of camera view, so it's difficult to say anything about the drivers and what they were doing, who they were honking at, etc. You can't really see the car park well, so it's not clear if anything else was happening there. Blah, blah, blah. And again, knowing men, they could very well have been primarily sexually harassing her. Like that would have been a saving grace. But there were a good number of comments throughout the comments section, each bringing up the same fact. A fact that kind of blew me away in terms of its clarity in helping us try to answer our initial question. The fact is summed up by the caption of the video, which I actually hadn't noticed when I first watched it. YouTuber believes she experienced racism after drivers honked their horns at her in a sundown town. A sundown town? What is that? As a Brit, I'd never heard the term. This is copying directly from Wikipedia, admittedly. Sundown towns, also known as sunset towns, grey towns, or sundowner towns, are all white municipalities or neighbourhoods in the United States that practice a form of racial segregation by excluding non-whites via some combination of discriminatory local laws, intimidation, or violence. Ah, well, that changes things, doesn't it? Alabama has approximately 29% of its citizens made up of African Americans, the 7th highest in the country. Coleman has around 2%, and as I did further digging, it turns out that in 2024 there was a relatively big online discourse surrounding this town. You see, Coleman, Alabama has a world-famous Christmas market, which was a big part of their modern current branding, and many Coleman resident influencers were posting about it, telling people to come down to Coleman, check out the market, a hallmark Christmas town. But this received a lot of backlash from both white residents and southern people of colour who claimed categorically this is not a safe place for black folk. One black TikTok influencer, Gabby with an I, warned visitors.
I've been seeing a lot of content on TikTok talking about, come on down to Coleman, Alabama. Oh, it's so nice. Look at the trees and the lights. It's a winter wonderland. Take your ass to Coleman, Alabama to see some trees. By sundown, you're going to end up an ornament. Okay? Okay.
Now, in the interest of fairness, many people have pushed back on the pushback, arguing that Coleman's past is just that, it's past, and that its current residents are not a party to those prejudices or practices. But in further, and I would argue more important interest, the endless accounts of people of colour in the comment section throughout all of the discourse I saw surrounding this town, for both the video of the woman as well as the Christmas market, said this town is not safe for us. It wasn't then, and it isn't now. One super reasonable commenter on the initial video said, "As a black person in this country, especially in certain areas, you know how to read the room. Why are you beeping like that when we're the only ones out here? It could be an inside joke, or it could be something deeper. But I wouldn't take that chance. I understand the way she feels because I've experienced similar situations. Some people would say it's silly, as people will always say, but always think about you and your family first. The responses were unbelievable. And so I return back to the image I started with. Someone trying desperately to get others to see, with them refusing aggressively and profusely to do so. But maybe the example is too vague. I mean, at the end of the day, there is some genuine and reasonable ambiguity to the example I provided. It may not have been racism. It may not have even been directed at her. I don't know. Now, I personally don't buy that for a second and think the fact that there is so much fear in this community surrounding this town and others like it is example enough, but maybe that's why they won't put the glasses on. Maybe that's why they can't see. It's just not clear enough. Before we move on to our second example, I just want to make one thing quickly clear. As was made very clear throughout the comments of the Coleman-related controversies, many people argue that overall, sundown towns are a thing of the past. In 2017, the NAACP published a travel advisory warning for the entire state of Missouri. This remained until 2023, and in 2023, the NAACP published a warning for the entire state of Florida. Sundown towns have a new face. They are not a thing of the past.
Part 3. Almost surgical precision.
As I was writing this essay, I knew my next example was going to be about voter ID laws in the US. And I wanted to find a quick explainer video. Because whilst I know the overall facts surrounding recent voter ID laws, and some relevant court cases, I wanted to get some reminders. And the first video I saw was a decoded video. In summer of 2015, MTV came out with a YouTube show called Decoded, hosted by an influencer content creator, Francesca Ramsey. It was a left-leaning, politically oriented YouTube series covering relevant political topics from a progressive and critical lens. And considering the atmosphere of YouTube in 2015, not too different to today, and broader politics in 2015, not too different today, it was pretty widely hated. I embarrassingly remember watching Debunk and Decoded Destroyed videos when I was 17. So I started to watch their video on voter ID laws, and it was covering all of the bases I would expect. What are voter ID laws? Why are they problematic when they seem so reasonable? Why might they be examples of structural racism, etc.? About 2 minutes into the video, in line with this essay, I was curious what the comments were like. And woof. The responses were unbelievable. And as you can imagine, it just goes on like this, for a solid 4,637 comments. The like to dislike ratio is 21,000 dislikes to 1.4 thousand likes. I say again, woof. Now, as I was reading the comments, I thought, man, it's such a shame. There was a court case that took place in North Carolina, which totally vindicates her, totally proves her point. It must have been after this video was already released. And then I clicked play. 28 seconds later, she said the following.
And speaking of North Carolina, they passed a law that imposed strict photo ID requirements on voters, in addition to ending voter registration outreach programs that historically increased Black voter turnout. Thankfully, this past July, a federal appeals court actually struck down North Carolina's voter ID laws, claiming they targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision.
This is 2 minutes and 28 seconds into the video. I'm going to let that quote from the appeal court echo again.
Claiming they targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision.
Now, in England and most of Europe, voter ID laws are standard. To vote, you have to show valid ID. But in the US, that isn't the case. Because the manner of elections are up to each individual state can decide whether voter ID is required, which ID is valid, etc. ID is required to register to vote, but not necessarily to vote itself. And again, that is up to each individual state. It is a state right. The long and short of this was that North Carolina Republican legislators requested data about voting patterns by race specifically. And using this, targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision. This included closing polling stations in disproportionately black precincts, removing early voting, which, using their data, they discovered and realised black voters predominated. Finally, discovering what IDs black voters predominantly used and banning a number of those from valid ID lists. This might be a student ID, for example. Again, surgical precision.
On Friday, a U.S. appeals court struck down a North Carolina law that required voters to show photo identification, scaled back early voting, ended out of precinct voting, and prevented residents from registering to vote on Election Day. In a remarkable judgment, the three-judge panel found North Carolina's law targeted African Americans, quote, with almost surgical precision, unquote. The judge found the legislators wrote the law after requesting data that showed African Americans disproportionately used early voting in both 2008 and 2012. Judge Diana Motz wrote, quote, "We cannot ignore the recent evidence that because of race, the legislature enacted one of the largest restrictions of the franchise in modern North Carolina history."
Now, this was ruled in court in 2016, and again in 2018, going all the way up to the Supreme Court. Each time, it was ruled that, yes, North Carolina had directly targeted black voters based on their race and their voting patterns. Categorically an example of systemic racism, as in prejudice entrenched in law and legislative intent, not in the 1960s, but in 2016. And this is by no means the only voter suppression case going on in the US. Notable examples being Texas, Wisconsin, and Georgia. Look in the news today and you will see a voter suppression case somewhere. And so we come back to our commenters, and we have to realise they didn't watch the video. I doubt they even glanced in its general direction. Similar to our Coleman example, they refused to properly engage. But unlike the previous example, these commenters haven't even begun to engage what is being shown to them. No actual debate, no explanation, no attempt to address anything said in the video. The Coleman example was dissected and analysed by the audience, and the commenters followed up with explanation and justification. But here we have a very clear and articulate expression of the disenfranchisement of racial minorities, and no one is even trying to argue against it. Not really. If we revisit our They Live scene, these commenters aren't even stepping into the fray. They've run away. They're throwing things at you from behind them as they flee. They've made their retreat and set traps along the way to slow you down. And we have to ask, why are they so deeply in denial? Why are they so intent on framing any analysis or critical insight into race today as definitively beside the point, obviously wrong? There are many answers to this question, I think. White fragility, survivorship bias, and more. But ultimately, today, I'm less interested on the why and more interested in the what. What is happening? And just how bad has it gotten? Now, before we move on to our next example, I have to make a disturbing confession. During the filming of this video, as I kept looking into the North Carolina example, despite the number of unsuccessful initial appeals to the overturning of these voting restrictive practices, in 2023 a newly conservative majority state Supreme Court overturned it. This meant that the ruling of racial discrimination was overturned. And whilst I am perfectly willing to accept there might be reasonable arguments, I do feel the evidence we've seen over the last 5 minutes alone present a pretty clear example of systemic racism. Despite my lay status, enough legal scholars in this case were very clear in this justification and condemnation of these laws. So, take that as you will. The decoded video came out in 2016. And most of its comments are 6 to 8 years old. The next example happened months ago.
Part 4. What if he acts like one?
On the 28th of April 2025 in Rochester, Minnesota, a woman by the name of Shiloh Hendrix was filmed being confronted after calling a 5-year-old the N-word. In the video, the man filming confronts the woman, seemingly moments after she called the child the racial slur. She responds by calling him the word, multiple times, flipping him off, saying the word again and again. claiming the child had stolen something from her or rifled through her bag. At one point in the video, the man filming says, "So that gives you the right to call a child, a 5-year-old, the N-word?" And she says,
"What if he acts like one?"
She repeats this precise sentiment later to the same question, saying,
"If that's what he's gonna act
That's
like,
what you're gonna call him.
that's what he's gonna act like."
and the responses were unbelievable. Now, it's important to first acknowledge she was obviously ridiculed and despised initially by a lot of people. She lost her job, had mobs of people sending her death threats, and all of the rest, not, mind you, entirely unwarranted considering all we outlined above, but it is important not to get lost in the online world. But then we really start looking at the response videos that started cropping up. The first 3 that come up when you type her name into YouTube are from Matt Walsh, Tim Paul, and Sargon of Akkad. 822, 105, and 375,000 views respectively. All far-right influencers. I'd like to take a section from Matt Walsh's video to really highlight how bad things have gotten. Now, first to say, Walsh's video is called "The Shiloh Hendrix Case Makes a Turning Point in the Racial Double Standard." Disturbingly true, as we will come to see soon. In this video, he says the following, seconds after watching the entire viral hate crime.
Now, before we continue with this story, which takes several more twists and turns, we should note a few things. First of all, we don't actually know for sure that the boy is 5 years old. That's coming from the man filming, who is apparently not related to the child. In the video, we appear to get a glimpse of the kid, and from the glimpse anyway, he definitely looks older than 5. Omar has additionally claimed that the boy is autistic, which we also have no proof of. And we have no footage of the actual encounter between the kid and this woman. Did she scream the N-word in his face? Did she mutter it under her breath? Did she say it about the child after he'd already run away? We don't know. And as far as I've seen, we haven't heard anything from the boy's parents. We don't know where they were in all of this, if they were even there, which is very strange.
Really look at that for a moment. I had a moment as I was rereading this where I started to write out responses. Started doing research. Was the child 5 or older? Is he autistic? How did the guy filming know him? But then I realised that doesn't matter, does it? Nothing that Walsh or anyone else who tried to justify or defend this incident matters. A fully grown woman called a child the N-word and then proceeded to say it over and over again to the man, to the child. Why would we have to wonder whether she whispered, muttered, or shouted the word? She was perfectly comfortable using it over and over again. And we can't forget what she said. What if he acts like one? And what that clearly means to her. No, all of this is a smokescreen. And thankfully for us, the comment section is considerably more upfront. Primarily focusing on the crimes of immigrants, of illegals, pointing to the sexual assault charges on a minor that the guy filming, who was a Somali immigrant, had against him 2 years before the incident. Now, these charges had been dropped and the case dismissed, so okay. But this is the focus. As with the death threats the mother and her child received, the use of the word in black culture, blah blah blah. The point is, throughout the comment section, it is super clear. This is racist, but we don't care about racism. As one of the commenters said, why would anyone feel guilty for having white skin? And there are 16,563 of them. The like to dislike ratio for this video is 37,000 likes and 1.4 thousand dislikes. Now, how many of them are real and not bots? Utilised extremely well by the far right and very far right communities. Even my last 2 videos can attest to this. I don't know. But they represent a real movement and a real moment that we have to start seeing. And by we, I do mean white people. We have to start noticing and doing something. Shiloh Hendrix set up a crowdfunding profile on the website Give Send Go, where she received at least $750,000 for calling a child the N-word, for committing an Obvious and outright hate crime against a literal child. She was made almost a millionaire, and they blamed the child, the man filming. This would be, coming back to our fight scene, if Nader asks Armitage to wear the glasses. Nader grins, takes out his own, puts them on, and walks away whistling.
Conclusion. We know what we saw.
When we think about the fight scene, one of the things that stands out, adding to its humour, is that neither side explains themselves. Nader asks him to put on the glasses, says he wants to save his life, and Armitage refuses, and then they fight. There's no further explanation on either side, and so the hilarity for the audience is in the absurdity. Why doesn't he just explain what the glasses do, emphasise his own surprise and confusion, and why doesn't Armitage just chuckle, grin, and try the glasses on for a moment? There is a humour in this dynamic. There is nothing funny about where we are now. The three examples I've discussed show different ways people fight not to see. First, they fight in ambiguity, revelling in all the places modern-day prejudice hides, in subtlety, plausible deniability, reasonable doubt. Then, they ignore good faith argument and analysis, legal and historical perspective, all simply run away from. And finally, they revel in it. Excuse it openly, not to seek truth, but to win a culture war. No longer hiding from the implication, we go from maybe they're not seeing it to they're seeing it and choosing it. It took me a long time to see, far longer than 7 minutes, I'll admit. I cannot apologise enough for how deeply I aligned with so many of the excuses in especially the first two examples. For how long I pushed and shoved and kicked and screamed not to see, not to have to see. But I do see now. Even if I'm still half blind, still stumbling into all the things that I didn't know, hadn't seen, hadn't been brave enough to acknowledge, I do see. And I have to see how close I was to being party to the final example, how easy it might have been for me to go from justification to obfuscation to celebration. A final thought. One that can't be resolved here, but lingered enough for me to pick it up. The experience of people of colour outlined above is harrowing. The fear, the constant state of alertness, awareness. Imagine for a moment that when you go to another state, to travel, to go on a holiday, you have to check online to see if it's really safe for people like you. I've never had to think about that. And I likely never will. And if you think about it really and sincerely, neither will you. Imagine knowing that this isn't just personal, it's not just anecdotal, it's systemic. It's baked into the rules and the rhythms of the country you live in. And past even that, the horror of knowing that for some, your suffering is not simply a misunderstanding, but a source of elation. How much they celebrate and revel in your pain, your suffering, your degradation. These are things I will never really experience, but I only know about them because others, despite all of this, have kept speaking, kept fighting. Through sheer force of will, through protest and dialogue, through art, through activism, they continue to speak. But it cannot be left for them alone. We can't keep waiting for black and brown people's pain to become a lesson, for the brutalization of marginalized groups and people to be turned into a teaching moment. It cannot always be their trauma that moves us, if we ever move at all. We have to start seeing. We have to start fighting for others to see. We have to fight for them to put the glasses on. In the fight scene, Nader eventually forces Armitage to see, to stare clearly at the truth, to put the glasses on, and this is a difficult thing to achieve. It's hard won. Because this truth is ugly, it highlights flaws, and more importantly, complicity. And we are complicit. Some more than others, sure, but we are all complicit. We know what we saw, and we can't turn away.
right.